Imagine a world where a father looked at his newborn child and had the legal right to decide, in that moment, whether that baby lived or died. Imagine a world where a wife was, legally speaking, a daughter to her husband, property to be managed, with zero legal standing against him. This isn't the backdrop of a dystopian sci-fi novel. This was the cold, hard reality of the Roman Empire, the world the Apostle Paul was born into. We read the Bible through 21st century lenses. We see words like submit, and we recoil because we live in a world of individual rights. But to understand the explosive power of what Paul wrote in Ephesians 5, we have to transport ourselves back to the 1st century, into a world of iron-fisted patriarchy, where Paul dropped a few sentences that were so radical, they were designed to dismantle the entire Roman household from the inside out. Let's set the scene. The Roman world was built on the concept of the pater familias, the father of the family. This wasn't a cute nickname. It was a legal status of absolute, terrifying power. The pater familias held patria potestas, the power of life and death. He could reject a newborn, leaving it to die of exposure. He could sell his children into slavery. He owned everything. His wife, in the traditional cum manu marriage, was transferred from her father's authority to his. She was a perpetual minor. Aristotle, the great philosopher, laid it out clearly. The male is by nature superior, and the female inferior. The one rules, and the other is ruled. That was the air they breathed. Now enter Paul. Most people open Ephesians 5 and jump straight to verse 22. Wives, submit to your husbands. And they stop there. They use it as a weapon to reinforce the very patriarchy Paul was actually subverting. Because if you back up just one sentence to verse 21, you find the key that unlocks the entire passage. Paul writes, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Do not miss this. Before he addresses husbands or wives, he lays down a blanket rule for all Christians. Mutual submission. This was unheard of. In Rome, submission was a one-way street. The weak submitted to the strong, the slave to the master, the wife to the husband. Paul says, no, in the kingdom of God, we submit to one another. He democratizes humility. He flattens the hierarchy under the lordship of Jesus. In fact, in the original Greek text, the word submit isn't even in verse 22. It literally reads, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, to your husbands as to the Lord. The wife's submission is just a grammatical subset of the mutual submission of the whole church. So what about the wives? Paul does call them to submit, but notice the reframing. In Rome, a wife submitted because she was inferior. She submitted because she had no choice. Paul gives her a choice. He addresses her directly as a moral agent, something Roman law rarely did. He invites her to voluntarily align herself with her husband, not out of fear, but as to the Lord. He dignifies her role by turning it into an act of spiritual worship, not social obligation. But if the instruction to wives was a reframing, the instruction to husbands was a nuclear bomb. The Roman men hearing this letter read aloud would have been nodding at verse 22. Yes, wives, submit. Good. Tell her, Paul. They would have expected the next line to be, husbands, rule your households well. But Paul pivots. He looks at the men, the ones holding all the cards, all the legal power, all the societal privilege, and he gives them a command that would have made a Roman aristocrat choke. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The word for love here is agape, self-sacrificial, dying love. Paul takes the Roman model of the husband as king and replaces it with the model of the husband as crucified servant. He tells the pater familias, the man who can kill his family, that his job is actually to die for his family. This is a complete reversal of power. Paul strips the husband of his privilege and hands him a cross. He says, you want to be the head? Fine. Here is what headship looks like in the kingdom. It looks like bleeding for the people you lead. It looks like washing feet. It looks like nourishment and care, not domination and control. He goes on to say husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. In Rome, a wife was property. Paul says, no, she is you. the separation is gone. Her pain is your pain. Her flourishing is your flourishing. Radical empathy replaces radical authority. And then, the climax, the mystery. Paul says this whole thing, marriage, isn't just about keeping society orderly. It is a mega mystery that points to Christ and the church. This elevates marriage from a functional contract to a theological drama. The husband plays the role of Jesus, the one who dies to give life. The wife plays the role of the church, the one who receives that love and responds in trust. It is a dance of mutual, self-giving love. So let's bring this to 2024. Why does this matter? Because we still get it wrong. We still have people using headship as an excuse for being a bully. Paul would say, "Show me your scars. If you aren't dying to yourself for her, you aren't the head." And we have people viewing submission as weakness. Paul would say, "It is the voluntary strength of the church." Paul didn't write Ephesians 5 to make women doormats. He wrote it to turn marriage into a living, breathing illustration of the gospel. He took the most oppressive institution of his day and injected it with the virus of grace. So the next time you hear these verses, don't hear them through the filter of modern gender wars. Hear them through the ears of a first-century Roman woman who just heard, for the first time in history, that her husband was commanded to die for her. That is the radical revolution of Paul. I want to know what you think. Does knowing the Roman context change how you read these verses? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to keep unpacking the Bible's toughest passages with us, hit that subscribe button. Class dismissed.